So it shows that Brazil is, of course, that it's an important financial market, but it's a financial market that is, because of this almost drastic, because it was a change that occurred in 2-3 years of reduction of interest rate, brings a lot of opportunities for new ideas to help people to invest better their monies, to help people to think about what they need. And I think that these two examples, Nubank as a unicorn, a fintech, and XP as it's not a fintech, but it's an innovative type of bank dealing with investments. So I think it's two examples that are very successful and shows that there is much to come.
Hello, world, and welcome to episode number 2 of the Innovating Advice Show. I'm Kate Holmes, and I am honored to be joined by Ana Cláudia Utumi, founding partner of Utumi Advogados, or Utumi Law in Brazil. Ana Cláudia is a powerhouse with incredible experience, including 28 years in tax advisory. She's a member of the New York University International Tax Program Practice Council. She's a professor of international tax in various postgraduate courses. She has an MBA in finance, a master's in tax law, a PhD in financial and economic law. She was part of the group that first brought CFP certification to Brazil in the early 2000s, and she's a CFP professional herself. And while all of this barely scratches the surface, she is also a member of the board of directors of Financial Planning Standards Board, which is where we first met. You're listening to the Innovating Advice Show, and I'm your host, Kate Holmes, bringing you the global pulse on financial services innovation, featuring financial planners, financial advisors, and related professionals from all corners of the globe. Let's dive in. Bom dia, Ana Cláudia.
Bom dia.
Ana Cláudia, you have accomplished so much and you are involved in many organizations. Share with us what brought you into the profession and what took you down the path that you've taken.
Initially, when I started working with taxes, I started assisting banks. So I used to work in a tax department of the former Coopers & Lybrand, and I was part of the team that used to assist tax matters, the banks, which led me in the interest to study in a more deeply manner financial and capital markets, the products, what are fundamentals of financial and capital markets. And I've already had a business background in addition to law, because I have the two graduations, law and the business administration. And then I went for an MBA here in Brazil. I've never studied outside Brazil. I've always studied and practiced here. And which was great because it was not only important for me to understand in more deeply manner financial transactions, how the financial markets work, commodities, future markets, and all sorts of financial products, but also open an important networking of people in the financial markets. When I left the auditing firm, when I left Coopers & Lybrand, I started to work in a law firm that it is a law firm that up to these days is very strong in the financial markets area. So we started in this law firm. I continue to assist banks, and also we started to assist individuals. So working with corporates and working with individuals at the same time, and much focus on taxation of financial and capital markets. Then because of this work developed with the financial institutions, with high net worth clients, in the beginning of 2000s, when a group discussed the possibility of bringing CFP certification and showing the CFP certification at that time was already a very important certification in the US. It was not so much spread out as it is today. But in the US, it was very important. So they needed someone to make part of this group that could navigate in tax matters, and especially tax related to the financial products, to financial investment, financial institutions. So they invited me to be part of this group, and it was very interesting this beginning because we were a small group. So even though I was in charge of the tax matters in the first 4 or 5 years of examination, we were a small group. And being a small group means that you interact very much with the other members of the group and get to know better. So there, we had people from insurance company, we had people very specialized in risk investments and fixed yield investments. So all of that made a very, very interesting and a very, let's say, very diverse group, and at the same time complementary. So there were no overlaps. In fact, there was a big collaboration. We could put in place in less than a year the first examination. And then in the second year, we had already 3 exams. And then we started to grow, and the association with the ANBIMA, the Association of Investment Banks, was very important for the growth of CFP. But I was enchanted with the concept of being a CFP, of helping people to think about their financials, not only thinking whether they can earn more or less money, but having this holistic view in the financial life, meaning what are your goals, what are your plans, what is the money you can bring in which phase of life you are, if you are in the phase of producing more income or consuming more income. So it was very nice because I was part of the group, of course, contributing with my expertise. My expertise has always been in the tax area, but on the other hand, getting all this information that was very not only interesting, but even useful for my personal life.
That's great. And I love, they say there are two things that are certain in life, death and taxes. And so you definitely went down an important route in everything you've done with taxes. But as we know in financial planning and financial advice, taxes is just one piece of the puzzle. So I love that you really wanted to be involved in the whole puzzle with becoming a certified financial planner professional, being part of bringing that to Brazil. And before we dive in further, we like to learn a little bit about the country our guest is from and about the advice market there. So Brazil is a huge country. It's the 5th largest country in the world by both land area and population, and has one of the largest economies in the world. And there are over 200 million people in Brazil?
Yes, that's correct. Almost 110 million.
That's incredible. And with your involvement with CFP certification, how many CFP professionals are there in Brazil now?
More than 4,000 CFP professionals.
And I know there was a big increase in CFP professionals a number of years ago. There was a rapid growth following an interesting recommendation for private banks. Can you talk us through that?
Yes, it was exactly when the association that brought the certification to Brazil, that used to be called IBCPF, nowadays is Planejar. But about 3 or 4 years after starting the CFP certification in Brazil, we were able to have an agreement with ANBIMA, with the Association of Investment Banks, agreed to help growing the number of CFP certificates, seeing what was the value of having the CFP, not only in the independent financial advisors, but also to have more people in the banks, especially in the area of private banking, with this knowledge. Because what is interesting is that CFP is not only financial knowledge, but rather, as I said, a more holistic view on the financial life of the person. So ANBIMA acknowledged the value of having all this knowledge and someone to test the knowledge of the professionals, and agreed to make a recommendation to banks that to have at least 75% of people that in the private banks that deal directly with the client, so what we usually call the bankers, so at least 75% of the bankers holding the CFP certification. And I remember that after I stepped out from the examination board of Planejar in Brazil. A few years later, I started to teach an in-house course in Bradesco, exactly in preparation for CFP. And Bradesco is one of the largest private banks we have in Brazil. So it was very interesting to see that the banks, not only Bradesco was the one that I was there for the in-house training in preparation for the CFP examination, but the banks started to stimulate and take measures for the bankers to be trained in topics that were necessary to take and be successful in CFP certification, to take the examinations and get the certifications. So the support of the banks was very, very important for the growth of CFP in Brazil. And I have no doubt that CFP is a certification that really is considered to be a quality stamp for professionals that hold the certification.
Absolutely. And good on Ambima for making that recommendation and for the banks in taking it up. Can you even imagine if bankers around the world had that holistic knowledge and everything that comes with going through the CFP certification process, understanding, the credit, debt, budgeting, mortgages, understanding all of those things as they're dealing day to day with their clients?
I think it would be much better, the type of service that they could provide. Of course, that we have excellent private bankers, even without CFP, but those who have CFPs are the ones that understood that you cannot look only at the bank statement of the client, of how much the client earns or how much the client has in his bank account, but learning more and showing interest in the life of the client, because in the end of the day, for you to be a good financial planner, you have to be concerned about not only in what are the financials, but what are the goals, what type of life this person has, what type of costs, what are the monthly costs, what the financial planner can help families to save, or what are the investments that are not adequate for this type of clients. Because even though my expertise is tax, oftentimes I see clients that they have the products that are suitable to the bank, but not necessarily the products that are suitable to the family.
Yes.
And to the extent that you have more bankers holding the CFP certification, and which means that these professionals with CFP's certification, they went through a formal, not formal, but formal or informal training on so many areas that are required for you to get the certification, is something that it's important to make this person think not about what are the products that are more fancy, that you have a greater bonus for if you sell more of that product, but rather what is necessary to build a long-term relationship with a family.
Yeah, that's great. And with a country as large as Brazil, with almost 210 million people, can you provide an overview of the broader financial market? What are some trends you're seeing there?
Our financial markets for many, many years were kind of accommodated because we used to have very high fixed interest rates. So the basic interest rate of the economy historically was used to be much greater than the international interest rates. But this reality has changed. So nowadays our interest rate is at international market levels, which make more important for those who have knowledge of financial planning and financial investments make them more necessary, because in the past it was very easy for me as an individual to buy sovereign bonds and get comfortable interest rate. Nowadays, no. Nowadays, if I just get, let's say, the sovereign bonds interest rate, I'll have just a little more than inflation, or depending on the year, I can have less than inflation rate. So I see that in the financial markets in Brazil, the financial planners and financial advisory market in general is expanding, exactly because people is understanding that they cannot be in those only plain vanilla investments that they are not going to earn much, or depending on the type of investment will earn less than inflation, that they need a more sophisticated advice. And this new world for us of low interest rate has also brought opportunities for fintechs. We see a number of fintechs going on in Brazil, and those fintechs targeting people that they need a financial advice, but they may not be the people that have enough funds to pay for a decent advice.
Yeah.
So we see a number of fintechs trying to facilitate and give a minimum of financial orientation for these people. And we have one of the fintech unicorns, one of the biggest fintech unicorns of Latin America is here in Brazil, that is called Nubank. It's interesting that it's a bank that for people that in the past wouldn't have a bank account or didn't have investments, and now they started with an online platform, firstly with a credit card, and then they expanded from a credit card for bank account, and now they are expanding for some types of financial investments. There is another bank that this month has an IPO in ICE, that is the XP Investments. It's a Brazilian bank, and this Brazilian bank grew a lot exactly because instead of having many branches, they decided to have a huge network of financial planners.
Oh, wow.
And they are independent advisors, and they use the XP platform to support investments of clients and accounts and so on. So it shows that Brazil is, of course, that it's an important financial market, but it's a financial market that is, because of this almost drastic, because it was a change that occurred in 2-3 years of reduction of interest rate, brings a lot of opportunities for new ideas to help people to invest better their monies, to help people to think about what they need. And I think that these two examples, Nubank as a unicorn, a fintech, and XP as it's not a fintech, but it's an innovative type of bank dealing with investments. So I think it's two examples that are very successful and shows that there is much to come. And in the future years, of course, that everybody is expecting a strength of stock markets in Brazil. So we have the largest stock exchange in Latin America, that is in São Paulo. And because of the reduction of interest rates, it's also raised more attention to investment in stocks. So with risk, but with a long-term view.
Great. Yeah. And I love seeing the evolution of fintechs in various countries, the problems that they're solving, sort of why they come about. And interest rates is certainly, they've got a positive and negative. My husband and I just bought a house, so having very low interest rates is great. But for the cash that we have sitting around, interest rates aren't so great. And bringing technology into solving some of those problems is a great way to introduce the public consumers to starting to get financial advice. And XP, I'll have to look into that, because leveraging financial planners and building a network, that's such a wonderful way to sort of get the hybrid advisor. So it's not all tech, it's not all human. You're getting a nice combination of both of those.
Yes, it's a very interesting experience, and as they recently listed in NICE, you can easily find the offering memorandum and more information on the way that they operate.
Excellent. Yeah, I'll look those up, and I might include the links to those in the show notes. So tell us a little bit about your firm, about Utumi Advogados, and how you are innovating advice, and specifically in the tax area.
We are a boutique firm. I started Utumi Advogados after 17 years as the head of tax of a major Brazilian law firm, a Brazilian full service firm. So I used to have 83 partners in the former firm,
Wow.
more than 60 lawyers only in the tax area. So it was a huge commitment. And after some time, I noted that I was much more in the management and more in the bureaucratic part of a partner in a big law firm instead of really practicing. So I decided to move to start my own boutique firm with a model of a personalized and closer to clients. So with a smaller structure, I have less administrative work and much more time to really practice, to attend academic events, because I think it's very important. The academia, not only the practice, I think it's a manner of always shaking up your ideas. I always tell that when I teach, sometimes someone that is looking at a certain subject for the first time has such an interesting question or an interesting view that you that is so expert in the subject never stopped to think about. So it's very refreshing to keep the academic activities. So I'm very active in academia as well, with lectures, classes. And what I consider to be innovative of our type of work is that I see many lawyers looking only at laws and at jurisprudence. We look at laws, at jurisprudence, and we think forward on what can be the consequences years ahead, how the authorities will see what has been done ahead, whether the structure that I have works today and will work in 2 or 3 years from now. What are the trends? What is happening in our other countries? What the tax authorities are doing in other countries? So this forward thinking I see as an innovation in legal markets. Probably I dare to say not only Brazilian legal markets, because most lawyers, they think much more about laws and jurisprudence and not so much on what may happen in the future. And the other point that we try to combine is the knowledge of the markets, meaning that if I'm going to work, for example, I work with one of the top producers of soft drinks in Brazil. I know everything about the markets of soft drinks because
Fun.
I think it's enough for me to just say, oh, the law says X or the law says Y. I need to tell them how the law will impact their business. So what are the implications? The same thing. I have clients in the cosmetics area. I need to know the specifics of the market to give the client the advice on the consequences, on the impacts, and not only tell them that the income tax regulation says Y or Z. And I see that oftentimes when we work with companies, this is the kind of difference that they enjoy. And also we work with families and families that are entrepreneurs, which is very interesting because most of the lawyers that used to work with families up to 10 years ago in Brazil were the type of lawyers that were all dedicated to family matters, didn't know much about business, didn't know much about how a company works, was very much attached to what the civil code says and how the family must do their succession or what the divorce law says, something like that. And we add this business view to family estate, which is very interesting because we are concerned about what will be the tax treatment of the monthly income or monthly funds that they are going to use for their maintenance. Let's get the best structure for their savings because it's a type of thing that they will only use in the long term. So I think that is forward thinking, concern with the business, and to look broader than only what is in the law, what is in the jurisprudence is what makes us different from other firms, I dare to say.
That's great. And that must have been a huge difference going from such a large firm to starting your own boutique practice. And so for listeners out there that maybe are in a large advice firm, a large financial planning firm, maybe they work in a large bank, do you have any advice for them in terms of thinking about taking that step and then actually doing it and going out on their own?
When you are in a big firm, doesn't matter if it's a big bank or a big law firm, you never know how much is your own goodwill and how much is the big plaque behind you. But one of the things that I note that people enjoy very much is attention. So to the extent that I can show that I'm really interested in the case, I'm really interested in solving the family problems. I'm not only there to just throw up whatever whatever the law says, but rather to be partner, to be this is what makes all the difference. So even if you are in a big firm, in a big bank, you have always to be concerned about what is the best interest of your client, more than what is the best interest of the firm and more than what is the best product that the firm offers, but rather what is the best interest of the client and giving the client the proper attention. To the extent that this person is able to make the client feels as if he was in a boutique, being in a big firm, I'm sure that this person is ready to go for other, let's say, to independent flights, to take independent flights.
Yes, so that's a challenge to listeners out there. If you're kind of going down that path, and I like the advice of starting to do it while you're still with a firm, start to sort of practice that, providing additional attention to the clients, because that's so much of what it means to run your own practice. And then you're right, when your heart and your gut and your mind are aligned and say go for it, then it's probably time to go for it.
That's right.
And I would say, is it fair to say that another way that you are probably innovating, I imagine there are not a lot of tax attorneys out there that are also certified financial planner professionals. And I'm sure that gives you a unique perspective when you're working with clients on their tax matters. Like you said, even, tax withdrawals and how that's going to affect them.
For sure it is. It's a big difference when you really understand financial products, when you understand all the matters that the CFP certification covers. So it makes me a much better tax advisor to the extent that I have not only the tax knowledge, but all this knowledge that the CFP certification brings in. And I like very much that for anyone to keep the CFP certification, it's necessary to fulfill the requirements of continued education. This is very important because you know that whoever holds a CFP certification is someone that not only studied a lot to get the CFP, but is continuing to study. And this is something that is very much appreciated. And oftentimes when some of the private banks refer clients to us, one of the things that they point out is that, you can go for this firm because they know not only the legal side, but they can better understand, the financial products in such a way that they can tell you what is the impact in the type of investment that you are doing.
That's awesome. And with your involvement and your knowledge and expertise in international tax law, when we think about financial planning across all the topic areas, it might be 50 to 70% global, and the rest is local tax laws, local regulations, local investment options. But the really tough one is tax. It varies so widely all around the world. Are there consistencies around the world when it comes to tax and how financial planners and advisors can work with clients who have assets in multiple countries and might be looking at what are the tax ramifications?
Uh, Consistency is what the OECD is trying to help the countries to have. So the OECD is a very important entity in international tax, exactly because the OECD is always looking at the legislations of each country and seeing the gaps. What are the gaps that may create loopholes? But the truth is, of course, that Brazil is one of the most complex systems in the world. It's not me saying it, it's the World Bank showing how much time people need to spend to calculate taxes in Brazil. So but in each and every country you will find complexities. So one important thing is that in tax matters, if someone says that, well, I know just a little about this tax, it's a little is not enough. A little is not enough. So every time that we work with a family, for example, with assets in different countries, we like to work together with tax advisors in other jurisdictions to make sure that whatever we help the clients to implement doesn't have an adverse tax impact in other countries. But in fact, there is some of alignment is that most countries, or 90% of 95% of the countries, you will find income tax. But the basis of the income tax law may differ from country to country. For example, in the U.S. nowadays, because of the tax reform of Trump, he created an income tax that for companies that only consider income generated in the U.S. This is completely different from most of other countries. And this point, for example, also in the U.S., of attaching tax residency to citizenship is a thing that is quite unique. Most countries, they don't attach tax residency to citizenships. So you have to be aware of the differences in a broader manner, in such a way that you know when you need someone on the ground to give you the proper and specific advice to avoid having the family with much more tax contingencies than income from assets of a certain country. And just one final remark, how countries are communicating to each other. We have nowadays about 100 countries automatically exchanging information on financial matters. So it's a huge system, and the countries' tax authorities are really global. It's not a local tax authority, it's a global tax authority.
And I've seen, 4 or 5 times this week alone, financial planners around the world looking for tax specialists to help their clients that have assets in multiple countries. So as the world continues to get smaller, the amount of people that have assets in multiple countries, even financial planners that work in multiple countries, how would you recommend that they connect and collaborate?
It's very important for as I mentioned, there is no much miracle. If you are in the US and you want to you want to buy an apartment in France, it may seem very simple, but there are so many issues of property tax, of succession tax, of wealth tax there, that it's not simple. So everything that seems to be simple, you need to confirm with a local advisor. And what for me it's very important, and for me it's something that makes all the difference, is to have a networking, a very good network of contacts and very good professionals in different countries, in such a way that if I have a family, for example, I'm advising nowadays a family with 5 children. One is living in Australia, the other is living in Canada, one is living in the US, and the other is living in Spain. Only one child lives in Brazil. So you have so many countries involved, and the parents, they have assets in Brazil, in the US, in Luxembourg, in Switzerland. So it is a multinational family, and it requires this international look, because if the father, for example, in the end of last year, he wanted to make a gift for each of the children, so we analyzed what were the impacts of this gift in each of the countries, because it was not only the gift tax in Brazil, because the donor in Brazil, so I have gift tax here, but also to check what were not only the taxation, but the ancillary obligations that each of the child would need to fulfill in the countries that they are living in. So this having this network is very important, because I don't take 2 weeks looking for who can be the best Australian tax advisor. And 2 days I have the proposal of Australian tax advisor for the client. I can coordinate this in a very efficient manner.
So for someone just starting out to start to build this network of tax advisors around the world, how would you recommend they go about doing that, so that when they are presented with that situation, like you said, they don't have to spend the time researching, they have that recommendation ready to go?
It's interesting that in the tax area, we have a large and significant association, that is the International Fiscal Association. And part of my networking is exactly by attending events and being active in this association. For 7 years, I was part of the practice council of the International Fiscal Association. So it gave me opportunity to meet tax practitioners of various countries, and also tax authorities of different countries as well, to build connections that go not only professional connections, but I have very good friends that are great tax practitioners in different countries, from relationships built through the International Fiscal Association. And certain other associations are very important in tax too, such as IBA, International Bar Association, and in companies, you have the Tax Executive Institute that is based in the US, for example, that is important. So getting to know better people through associations is something that is interesting. And in the financial markets is the same. So for me, Planejar is a very important source of contacts and networking. So when a family needs a financial advice, I know many family offices, multifamily offices, private bankers, not only because of my practice, but also because of my participation in Planejar. So getting to know and being more active in associations is something that I do recommend.
And I echo that sentiment. There is no replacement for networking with people, going to conferences, going to events. I know they can feel expensive. You're taking time away from the office, but the value that it provides, especially when you do it, as frequently as you do it, but just starting to build those relationships, it makes you a better practitioner. It allows you to better help your clients. And I think it just keeps you involved in the profession in a really nice give-take way.
That's right. I totally agree.
So Ana Cláudia, I know you are super active on social media. You're a huge advocate for social media. So how can listeners find you, connect with you, and follow all the great work you're doing?
I always post about my work and the events that I attend at LinkedIn and on Twitter. So on Twitter is Ana_Utumi and LinkedIn Ana Cláudia Utumi. You can find me there.
Excellent. And I'll make sure those links are included in the show notes. And I always end by asking what your favorite food or drink is from your country.
Oh, the basic food in Brazil, that is rice and beans, is still my favorite. When I travel for many days outside Brazil, I come back crazy about eating rice and beans again. So this is what I miss much when I'm outside Brazil.
Simplicity. I love it. Just stick with the basics. It's what you grew up on, what you're used to. I love rice and beans as well. That is absolutely a go-to for me also. Ana Cláudia, thank you so much for joining us today. I so appreciate it. Thank you for all of the knowledge, the inspiration that you've provided to advisors and planners that might be thinking about going out on their own, that are working with clients that have assets around the world, encouraging them to get out and network and really become a bigger part of the profession and building those relationships. Any last words?
Thank you for this opportunity. It has been a pleasure and honoring. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Innovating Advice Show. I would love to hear from you directly about what resonated, what didn't, and what you'd like to hear in future episodes. You can connect with me on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram at Innovating Advice, or hop on over to innovatingadvice.com. Till next time.